Hello. So right now what we do is we will look into the structure of the plasma membrane. So we were talking about the cell organelles, right? So the most important organelle, as I said, right, which is found in every cell is the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. So it is so important because it will control what comes in and what goes out of the cell, like a door to your home, right? So you have, this is the cell, this is the house of the cell. So this is acting like a door so that it can control what comes in and what goes in. It will not allow everything to come in and everything to go out. So it is very protective about the cell. So it controls the movement, entry and the exit of the molecules in and out of the cell. So that is why they use a term which is called as selectively permeable. So this part you should remember. When I say selectively permeable, what does it mean? Because it is selectively letting things inside the cell. It selects what can come in and what can go out. That is the reason why the plasma membrane or the cell membrane is called as selectively permeable. Okay, so remember this term. And then apart from that, if you look at the cell membrane function, I have already told you, it controls what comes in and what goes out of the cell, and it's very flexible membrane. It is actually not a rigid structure. It's a bit flexible. It can expand, it can, contract kind of thing. It is flexible. The flexibility is because of the structure. So if you look at the structure of the cell membrane, the plasma membrane, what is it made of? So let me show you here. See this. So the cell membrane is made up of two different molecules, organic molecules, which are known as proteins and lipids. Okay, so you can see in this picture, right? So this this purple color structure are all proteins, and then those round globe like things, right, you can see in between. So they are all lipids. So basically it is made up of proteins and lipids. So this is about the plasma membrane. So now before we move on, so the one question is, okay, it selectively allows things to come in and to go out. So what kind of things a cell will need, right? What does it need to take from the surrounding? And what is that it needs to leave the cell? What are the things that need to leave the cell? What are the things that need to enter the cell? So we need to know a little bit about it, right? So that's what we are going to talk about. Say for example, if this is a cell, right? So a lot of things like, for example, respiration. Whenever the cell respires, so the oxygen need to be taken in and carbon dioxide need to come out of the cell. So this is one thing that need to be transported in and out of the cell, the gases. We call it as gaseous exchange, right? So the exchange of gases, that is one important thing that should happen through the cell membrane. And of course the cell needs food, right? It needs glucose, it needs proteins, right? All those things we call them as nutrients. So the cell needs to take in lot of nutrients so that it can respire, it can get energy, right, to work. And then it needs a lot of minerals, because lot of reactions in the cell require the presence of mineral ions like sodium, chlorine and things like that, chloride ions. So all those things. And of course, if you look at it, the most important thing the cell needs is water, right? So the water need to come in and come out of the cell. And so there's so many other things, but these are the most important things for us right now to understand how these things come in and get out. What is the mechanism of transport? Okay, they come in. How do they come in? So there are different processes involved here. So let's talk about each process in detail. So the first process is actually called as diffusion, right? So I'm sure you would have heard about this a lot before, isn't it? So what is diffusion? Maybe in your chemistry or, where you would have learnt about diffusion. So diffusion is, spreading out of molecules. Just the molecules spread from the place where they are in high concentration. Say assume that these are all the molecules here, and then, they tend to spread out from the region of high concentration to the region of low concentration. So after some time they'll spread out completely like this. Okay, that's how diffusion works. So diffusion is movement of the molecules along from the place where it is in high quantity, we call it as high concentration, to a place where it is low in concentration. So this process is known as diffusion. Okay, so low concentration. So it spreads out, the molecules tend to spread out from a region of high concentration to low concentration. So it is basically happens spontaneously. Diffusion is a spontaneous process. So you can see here, see, it's a transport mechanism where you can see here, you put a drop of ink in, in water. So what happens? You can see how it spreads out, right? The whole beaker now will have blue color because it spreads. So that is how it happens. So why this mechanism, how this mechanism works in the cell, especially for gases like carbon dioxide moves out of the cell through diffusion, because what happens is, and oxygen moves into the cell. So how does that happen? Through diffusion only. Say for example, the tissues, when the blood carries oxygen to the tissues, assume that this is the blood vessel carrying a lot of oxygen, and then these are all the tissues. Okay, now the tissues are made up of cells only. So what happens, once the oxygen comes here, it has to come out and then get into the cell. So when it comes here closer to the tissue, there is a lot of high concentration of oxygen in the blood, but tissues keep using oxygen for their own respiration, so there will be low oxygen inside the cell. So what happens then? Oxygen molecules will simply diffuse into the tissues. Similarly, whenever the cell respires, right? So the cells take in oxygen and they release carbon dioxide. So there will be a lot of carbon dioxide here, CO2. So how does it go in? Through diffusion into the blood. Because in the blood there will be low amount of carbon dioxide. So when the blood leaves the tissues, you can say it will be low in oxygen, but it will be high in carbon dioxide because it diffuses in and diffuses out. So this is the mechanism which works. So the diffusion rate, how fast it depends upon how fast it diffuses. So it depends upon the distance. One of the factors. There are so many other factors. So the distance between from where to where it has to go. And then the most important thing the diffusion depends upon is the difference in concentration. What we call it as concentration gradient. So concentration gradient means difference in concentration. So higher the difference in concentration, more would be the rate of diffusion. So in other words, higher the concentration gradient, higher would be the rate of diffusion. More molecules will diffuse. So the diffusion depends on concentration gradient, and also it depends on the second factor the diffusion depends upon is the distance. Shorter the distance, higher would be the rate of diffusion. Naturally, right? It doesn't have to move a lot. So small distance, it will happen faster. The third thing is surface area. Surface area means what? How much area is available for diffusion. If a lot of area is available, more molecules will diffuse, right? So these are the three main things that control the rate of diffusion. So that's about diffusion. So mostly the gases generally enter and exit the cell through the process called diffusion. So then the next question comes, okay, gases coming and go out like this. How about water? So the entry and exit of water is also happening through diffusion only, but there is a special word for it. We call that as osmosis. Okay. So what does osmosis is? Osmosis is nothing but diffusion of water. Okay, just remember it. It is just the diffusion of water. That means the water is moving from high concentration to the low concentration, But the one thing you need to add to this to make it osmosis is diffusion of water across the selectively permeable membrane. Okay, that means sometimes they use this word called semi-permeable membrane also, but the better word to use is selectively permeable membrane. Okay, so diffusion of water across selectively permeable membrane is osmosis. That's all it is. It is just diffusion of water. Let's see how it works, because how does it work in a cell? So let me explain. Say for example, let us take, you can see the picture there, right? So you can see here. So this is pure water, okay? So and then you can, in a beaker, in a compartment, there is a pure water. Let's call this as compartment A, and then there is another compartment, compartment B. So you can see here, this compartment A and B, they are separated by, a selectively permeable membrane. You can see that, right? Membrane kind of thing. And this selectively permeable membrane is permeable to water. Okay, it is permeable to water. And if you see, on the other side, the compartment B has a solution, right? It is not pure water. What do you mean by solution? So solution has two parts to it, right? One is solute, the other one is solvent. So the moment the solvent is the liquid part, the water. Solute, maybe here in this case it is sucrose. Okay, so the sucrose plus water, that is sucrose solution. Now compartment A is having pure water. Now compartment B is having sucrose solution, and this semi-permeable membrane allows only water molecule. It will not allow the sucrose molecules to diffuse. It is not permeable to sucrose. So that you need to remember. So now what would happen to water? Since this pure water, if you look at this compartment A, it is pure water, a lot of water molecules are there, and the concentration of water in sucrose solution is lesser, right? Because there are more sucrose molecules and then water molecules are lesser. So what would happen now? What would be the direction of the movement of water? It is diffusion, which means it is from compartment A to B. Okay, so the net flow of water. Why do we use the word called net flow? That's very important, because the water molecules keep moving across in both ways, because the membrane is permeable to them. So they keep moving this, from A to B as well as B to A. But the number of molecules moving from A to B will be higher. Okay, that's why we call the net flow. Net flow is to which is more. So in this case, the number of water molecules diffusing from A to B is much higher compared to the number of water molecules going from B to A. So net flow is from A to B. That's what we'll say. So the water molecules will move from A to B. So it is simply a diffusion of water across the semi-permeable membrane. That's all osmosis is. So let us look at certain conditions to understand this. Okay, so understand this better. So let me now talk about let's take a condition. Okay, condition like, for example, let's take the same type of compartments, compartment A and compartment B. Okay, this is compartment A, this is compartment B. So what in compartment A you have 10% sucrose solution. Okay, 10% sucrose solution, whereas in compartment B it is 30% sucrose solution. Okay, so if you look at this one, which is dilute solution, the dilute solution is in A. So this is dilute. Because why do you call it dilute? Because it has, compared to this is dilute. Why? Because it has less solute only 10 grams, and then it has more water, isn't it? But then if you look at this solution, it is just the opposite. It is concentrated. We compare to this. It's always, you have to, relative term, you have to compare. So here the concentration is higher. So it's called concentrated solution, which means more solute and less water. Solvent is water, right? Less water. So now how the water would move? Always water moves from more water to less water, right? So water would now move from 10% to 30%. Okay? So from a dilute solution to a concentrated solution. Always keep in your mind the solute concentration is not important. It is the water concentration that is more important, because it's the movement of water that happens across the semi-permeable membrane. So water moves from high concentration of water to low concentration of water. If you want to define in terms of solution, water moves from a dilute solution to a concentrated solution across the semi-permeable membrane. Okay, so this dilute solution, they use a word called hypotonic solution. Especially when it comes to the biology about the cells, we talk about a dilute solution as hypotonic solution, and the concentrated solution is called as hypertonic solution. So this is used in biology with respect to the environment of the cell.